Terry Guerin Scoggins Political Newsletter, Bible Prophecy Times Edition Update. Many states are trying to pass bullying legislation for our public schools. The problem with this legislation is that they are targeting a protected class under religion of Christian students. They've said plainly they want it to be considered bullying for Christian students to openly speak their version of their faith, which for most Christians is in support of Romans chapter 1, calling homosexuality sin. Those backing this bullying legislation want to bring back in the hate speech laws that censored Bible scriptures on homosexuality, criminalizing it, which was overturned by the federal Supreme Court in the Phelps hearings due to the constitutionality. It is illegal to censor someone's religious beliefs, including Christian students, in a public school. Just as they have student-led prayer, they also have student-led Bible studies and their own students' freedom of speech rights fully intact when on government land. There is no freedom from religion. Our federal Supreme Court did not find a freedom from religion. We know that this was the case since they brought up our founding fathers quoting the Bible scriptures a documented 15,000 times while standing on government land, making our laws in government sessions and on the time clock as government employees. They also opened and closed every session in prayers to God while standing on government land and on the government time clock as government employees. Our federal Supreme Court did not find a freedom from religion, as our founding fathers did these things standing on government land, openly professing their faith and reading from the Bible. That was not a freedom from religion, and it shows their intent was not a freedom from religion. They expected tolerance from those that disagreed with their religious faith, just as in our public schools. Christians have their civil rights when they walk onto government land, including freedom of speech. Tolerance is expected from those that disagree with their religious faith. Censorship, like hate speech laws, breeds religious intolerance. It's based on religious intolerance. It is unconstitutional, and the hate speech laws were overturned in the federal Supreme Court. That is the court precedent. They cannot bring bullying legislation in, including the hate speech laws, into our public schools, going against that federal Supreme Court precedent, where the federal Supreme Court supported our legal right to, quote, debate the issue. Our students have the legal right to debate homosexuality in the public school system, even from a biblical standpoint, according to our laws. That right shall not be infringed. Bullying legislation cannot bring in anti-Christian censorship. It's unconstitutional and goes against the federal Supreme Court upholding their legal right to debate the issue, overturning the hate speech laws from the Obama-Pelosi legislation of hate crimes. That is no longer the law. The federal Supreme Court precedent has been set, and bullying legislation cannot usurp that. Neither can the no-hate legislation Democrats have proposed, again targeting Christians with censorship. We do not have state-approved sermons. We also don't have religious censorship in our public schools. Tolerance is expected. They have the legal right to debate the issue, including Romans chapter 1, or debating other religions, and freedom of speech straight across the board. The federal Supreme Court supported the Christians' legal right to proselytize their faith, to spread the gospel legally, without censorship. This is also true in our public schools, as long as it's student-led. This is the law, and the Christian students will not suffer anti-Christian discrimination or censorship, violating the First Amendment rights and the federal Supreme Court rulings. The bullying legislation is another attempt to bring in this anti-Christian censorship and illegally target religious beliefs of students and their legal right to proselytize, spread their faith, and speak openly about what their religious beliefs are. Again, bullying legislation cannot bring in the hate speech laws that were overturned in the federal Supreme Court, as the federal Supreme Court overturned it, supporting the Christians' legal right to debate the issue. This is straight across the board, even when they're on government land. Again, the federal Supreme Court did not find a freedom from religion. Tolerance was expected from the people who disagreed with their Christian religious faith. The federal Supreme Court also upheld the Christians' legal right to adhere to, quote, core values. This is also true for Christian students and Christian students' religious groups. If their core values is Romans chapter 1, biblical scriptures that do not condone homosexuality, they have the legal right to adhere to Romans chapter 1. This is the law. And their legal right shall not be impeded by unconstitutional legislation. This is the Christian student's civil rights and the rights of the Christian church. Keeping in mind these resource officers, police officers put in the public schools that have notedly been sending in Democrats to target the Christian students, trying to get them for hate speech laws, even though hate speech laws were overturned. Just as the Christian church cannot be policed by the state, it violates separation of church and state, keeping the state out of the church, and ending religious discrimination. Our Christian students in the public school system cannot be policed by informants or officers in the school system coming in to harass them for their religious beliefs, for adhering to their core values, as the federal Supreme Court supported their legal right to do. They cannot be demonized for supporting Romans chapter 1, calling homosexuality a reprobate mind, as this is their core values and they have the legal right to adhere to them, according to the federal Supreme Court precedent. And again, they cannot be targeted with accusations of hate speech or trying to set them up for it, recording the Christian students, trying to get them on tape making statements that they don't support homosexuality in order to try to demonize them for court. This is religious discrimination, violates separation of church and state, keeping the state out of the church, goes against the federal Supreme Court ruling that they have the legal right to debate the issue on homosexuality, as confirmed when the hate speech laws were overturned in the federal Supreme Court. And this is basic religious discrimination, going against the federal Supreme Court ruling that they have the legal right to adhere to their core values, which includes Romans chapter 1 and other Bible scriptures that do not condone homosexuality. It's the Christian students' civil rights being violated by law enforcement and the school system, both of which can be sued for punitive damages, for abuse of a public office, religious discrimination, violations of separation of church and state, keeping the state out of the church, and police harassment. Keep this in mind and make sure if your students are being victimized as Christians to carry their tape recorders around or use their cell phone recorder or a digital recorder to record these government informants in order to file a lawsuit and document any attempt to coerce your student, your teenage child, into saying something against homosexuality so they can get it in their tape recorders to be used against the Christian student for court, illegally demonizing their religious beliefs, violating separation of church and state, of which the state cannot condemn nor condone any aspect of a religious belief, including that of Romans chapter 1, and making sure your students record the government informants illegally bringing up religion or political beliefs, as both would violate their civil rights. It's abuse of a public office for them to be bringing up the students' political or religious beliefs, just as it would be illegal for them to bring up the political or religious beliefs of those in the Christian church. It violates separation of church and state, abuse of a public office, and is religious discrimination, going against the federal Supreme Court hearings, supporting their legal right to debate the issue, and adhere to core values. These federal Supreme Court precedents support the Christian civil rights of the students and the Christian church at large. Make sure the Christian students having their civil rights violated in the public school system, again, do record the conversations with these government informants or any teachers or faculty that might be trying to violate their religious civil rights. Document all emails, postings, and comments on their social media or any text messages they may receive to be used in court, exposing this illegal activity by informants and officers or faculty and students violating the Christian civil rights. Document any letters from students or informants, faculty or staff, any memos, letters, anything written saying any form of policy they're now trying to adhere to which violates Christian civil rights and the free speech rights of the students. Save these for court. Make a note of any policy that the public school is trying to enforce or any policy that law enforcement or their informants are trying to enforce that infringes the Christian civil rights. Save this documentation for court and be ready to file suit to enforce the Christian students' Christian civil rights. Much of the liberal Democrat revisionist history taught in our public schools have purposed to leave out that the hate speech laws that were in the Obama-Pelosi legislation, now overturned by the federal Supreme Court, was akin to the Nazi good speak laws, where they criminalized the religious beliefs of Christians and Jews alike. The scriptures that pertain to homosexuality, making it illegal to speak against homosexuality or any actions therein, therefore criminalizing their religion, being the main source of why many were arrested and ended up in the concentration camps. History repeats itself when it's not told from an accurate viewpoint, telling the whole truth about what happened and why it happened. After the Nazi indoctrination started in pre-Nazi Germany, de-Christianizing the population, leading to the population burning their Bibles out in the streets, renouncing Christianity and Judaism with a full hatred of, remember that it was incited by a gay regiment in the German army called the Brown Shirts. It wasn't until Hitler decided that it was a defective gene that caused homosexuality that he then put them in the concentration camps as well. Many years had gone by where they helped Nazi Germany de-Christianize their population. Make sure that that type of anti-Christian or anti-Judaic religious intolerance does not permeate the United States culture with this New Age movement that is close akin to that of Nazi Germany. This has been another edition of Carrie Guerin-Scoggins' Political Newsletter Bible Prophecy Times Edition Update. Look for more information, Carrie Guerin-Scoggins' Political Newsletter and Carrie Guerin-Scoggins' Political Newsletter Bible Prophecy Times Edition, Facebook pages and bloggers.